This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Well, Alaska's longest-serving congressman, I mean, how many terms has he served? 24 terms. Don Young is running again to continue serving, and he is a challenger, and she challenged him 2 years ago, and she's back. And based on the messaging I'm seeing, a lot of money is being spent, both sides, to get a victory for Congress here in Alaska. Alyse Galvin is her name. And Alyse, you must be working your butt off. I see your ads and your branding all over the place and your team the same. Are you just traversing city to city, talk show to talk show? This is the busy time of year, isn't it?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, it is busy. I'll tell you what, though. I've been working pretty much since 2018 to get word to a lot of Alaskans. It takes time to earn that much trust. So I've been taking it seriously, and I hope that people will see that I'll work in D.C. just like I'm working here in Alaska, 7 days a week.
I talked to your daughter, Bridget. She was very delightful, very thoughtful, trying to get you on air. Of course, she's the biggest fan of her mother. And I texted Bridget. I said, man, a lot of messaging, a lot of this, a lot of that. But I got to ask your mom about the ad where you go through all kind of like the Johnny Cash song, I've been everywhere. You've worked everywhere. And I said before you came on here, my first hour of my show, I said, I'm going to ask Alyse that. And of course, she's going to say, no, people like it. It resonates. But I have an ad agency, and we help the other team. We help Republicans. So I don't know if I would have made that ad because, not to pick on you, but it might give the indication that you bounced around at a lot of jobs. What are you finding from folks, and what is your response when someone says, wait, has she held down a job? Do you think it's testament to your kind of experience, and is that one of the reasons you branded yourself as such?
Hey, listen, I appreciate that ask. I've had it quite a few times. I'll tell you this much. I'm 55 years old. I put myself through college. Anyone who's done that, I'll tell you, I know if they put themselves through college, they worked a lot of jobs. So in my case, sometimes it was 2 or 3 jobs at a time, but I did it. And I'm proud of that hard work, and I think Alaskans need to know that. So yeah, I worked in a lot of different restaurants, right? And that's what you saw. You saw Simon and Seaford. You saw a hot dog place. You saw pizza, right? I mean, hey, there's a lot of people who have done that. And in today's economy, unfortunately, it's really rare to have only one job. And so I was speaking to all of the Alaskans who are living a pretty tough life right now, having to work more than one job. And yes, I've had steady jobs as well. But this commercial was really speaking to the Alaskan who knows how tough it is to pay the rent, pay the electricity, pay the bus or car maybe, and live on one job. There's a lot of voters like that, Tom, and we need to get them back in and voting. We need them to know that they're part of democracy too.
If you get into Congress and we continue to see the Democrats in charge, I don't know if that can be switched this cycle. U.S. Senate, it's going to be close. I think the Republicans will keep it. I can't call the presidential race. That one's a tight one as well. But in the House, it looks like it's going to remain Democrats. So you get in, you would be on that team. There's going to be some issues that pop up, and I'm sure you get asked this, so sorry to be repetitive, but new audience with mine, like on gun control. There's been some, messaging, social media messaging and such, and I recall seeing one, I thought, communications on your team. Somebody wrote that you're a gun control advocate, and then I've heard others say, no, you're not. How do you answer that when a lot of Alaskans are really pro don't take my gun and don't limit or regulate? How do you stand on, quote, gun control?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. I don't know where you must be reading the funny papers because I've seen some of that. I'm fully in support of our Second Amendment rights. I was hunting since I was, I think my first hunt that I can remember was 7. I'm an Alaskan, so growing up in a family of gun owners who taught me how important it is that this is part of our culture. I value guns not only for subsistence but also for protection in sport. That's Alaska. I'm really sad that this race has gotten, well, honestly, my opponent's been so desperate that he's made up all sorts of stuff. So I'm really glad to be here on the radio clearing it up.
One thing I will say, and I don't know Don Young well, but I don't know if I would label that as desperate. He doesn't seem like that type. He seems like the tough type, and you have your own tenacity, and you have your own attributes. And I think that this idea of comparing and contrasting principles, policies, plans, to me, that's how I like races to be. Again, my day job is an ad agency where some of our clients, about 25%, are political, and speaking from myself, we don't go negative. I mean, I could name all the clients, Edie Grunwald and others, where it was all positive run. Jim Matherly up in Fairbanks. And so when I look at your race and I look at messaging, how do you feel about and I haven't researched monies from who, what, where. Do you get frustrated? And I've asked other candidates this, when outside groups, whether for your opponent or on your behalf, go after. We're seeing that with Gross and Sullivan, right? For U.S. Senate. It's like, Dan Sullivan's not an Alaskan. He hates humans. Al Gross is a scumbag, and he hates you. And it's like, who's writing this? And it says paid for by a group out of state. It's not from their respective. And maybe that's a deflection. Maybe that's a barrier so they don't have to be part of it. Or maybe it's just, they didn't plan on it whatsoever. How do you feel about that? Because there are negative ads going against Don Young and against you, and how do you feel, and do you take any ownership in a negative volley against the opponent?
Well, let me tell you this much. There's a difference between a comparative ad that has facts in it and then something that's out and out lying. That's not tenacity, by the way. And he's making this stuff up. I just have to tell you, I'm so sad to see this, because I'm wasting my time saying that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, instead of saying this is what we can do for Alaskans together. We have a lot of great ideas coming in the future, and unfortunately, that's kind of where it's headed. So last cycle, he said he's run for 45 years and never ran a negative campaign. Well, I guess 47 is the charm, because he's gone completely negative on me, and I'm telling the truth. I have nothing to do with the national words that you're hearing, like I think it's Green New Deal and AOC, never met her. Nancy Pelosi, never met her. I'm really not that way. I'm not from the political machine. I'm doing this for public service. I'm a mom of 4. I've owned a couple of businesses, so I kind of know what it's like to live here in Alaska, and make sure that we have somebody in Washington who gets it, who is doing this not only for public service, but understands laws and how they get passed, understands how important it is that we keep our next generation here, that they've got great jobs. That's what we should be talking about.
When you're we're talking with Alyse Galvin running against Don Young, and if you get in, there are the big issues. I talk about them every day, believe it or not. Here, I don't always go local, I go national and international. When we talk about things like the Paris Climate Accord, or the Iranian deal, or Trump's had some tax cuts out there, opening ANWR. Where do you stand on some of these larger, the momentum under President Trump and Don Young has been to get out of that, when they're holding our hands on environmental regulations that we deemed affected us adversely, we meaning President Trump's administration. And I would concur with that.
Let me start by saying I'm all for opening ANWR. Let's get those good jobs. Chase them down. We need them.
So you're pro ANWR. Okay.
Absolutely. My husband's in oil and gas, so I really understand how important it is that it's going to be decades before we move off of oil and gas. We need to really understand that and get our fair share, make sure that we're in there for those jobs.
What about Trump's tax cuts? And I'm not going to delineate. We're almost out of time. In fact, think about your answer, and we'll talk about. I also want to ask who you're going to vote for. I'd love to know that. We're going to come right back. Her name is Alyse Galvin. She's running for Congress. She wants to take Don Young's seat. She's right here on The Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Back with Alyse Galvin running for U.S. Congress, great state of Alaska. And before the break, talking about what will happen, Alyse. And thank you so much, by the way, for coming onto the show. We have folks in Anchorage, Eagle River, Chugiak in the Valley. So it's a pretty big populace of the morning rush hour, and I thought it was kind of you to call in and get your message out and take some questions, and we may have one or two. We had someone call in that I asked them to call back, Kevin from the Valley. We'll get to him in a moment with a quick question. But mine was on Trump administration moving forward. There's some cuts. He's certainly pro-oil, pro-fracking, looking at Tongass, is holding back a little bit on Pebble. So some of those issues, for instance, Pebble. Do you have a thought on that, or have you weighed in on it?
Oh, I've weighed in. I'm probably right there with Trump. I think that mining is good in Alaska, but in that spot, it's a little too risky against, our other fishing industry. That's $1.5 billion of good revenue in fisheries. I would not want to give up that baby. So I'm really, I think it's important that we recognize Alaska as a natural resource state. And mining is a key part of it, but so are our fisheries.
How about
I'm
Tongass?
opposed to the Pebble project, the way it's lined out. They've not demonstrated that current technology can't overcome the threat to Pebble and to the Bristol Bay, and we just can't have, that threat. That's too risky.
And bounce over to Southeast Tongass. You probably read with interest what's happening there. Do you want to see any woodcut or any road systems going through that at all? Smidgen of it, or where do you stand there?
Yeah. I support being reasonable about this, right? We need revenue, so I think it's important that we find a way to the timber harvesting that's still protecting what's there, and there's a way to do that. So we need to be reasonable, and we need to make decisions that still keep revenue coming into our state and protects the old growth, which is possible.
We're going to bounce over to Kevin Cole coming in from Matsu, listening and patiently waiting. Kevin, what's your question for Alyse Galvin?
So, Alyse, as many politicians do, you dance around the Second Amendment question by talking about guns and hunting and personal protection, and that's not really the question. The question is, are you a supporter of the Second Amendment? The Second Amendment was never designed to provide guns for hunting or guns for personal protection. It was to provide for protection against a tyrannical government. So people that talk about, yes, I support guns for hunting and guns for personal protection, typically are those who put in red flag laws and all that sort of stuff. So I want to hear your views on the Second Amendment, not on guns, not on hunting, not on personal protection, but on the Second Amendment.
Thanks for the call, Kevin in the Valley. Alyse, what say you on that?
Thanks so much for asking that question, Kevin. I'm glad you asked. I absolutely support the Second Amendment.
Okay.
There you go.
There's your detailed answer. Support the Second Amendment, support ANWR, questionable on Pebble Mine, Tongass, open up somewhat, dealing with Alaskans, respect, working with them. You mentioned commerce and business. What makes you different from Don Young? Sounds like Don Young.
Well, actually, there's quite a bit of difference.
No, but I mean all those. That's Don Young. We already got that in place.
Well, let's start with civility, honesty, transparency. Those are pretty important values, I think, that I hope to bring. The other piece is that I can get into power. I'm unfortunately or sadly, Don Young no longer can get into any chairmanship. Not only is he in the minority, but he can't, because his own party he's termed out, or because of ethical reasons he's been pushed out. So this is a really important piece that I hope your listeners appreciate. We only have one seat there. We cannot afford to have that seat not in a position where we can get to power. And I'll always show up for the votes. Don Young, unfortunately, gosh, I think he's not showing up 14% of the time. And what that means is he's about 3 times the average of a representative not showing up. 3 times the amount he's not showing up. And I'll always show up for those important votes to Alaska and our economy. So let's have somebody new after 47 years who's going to bring something back to Alaska that we need, that keeps our next generation in jobs. That's really what this is all about. And I hope we can reframe the questions to talking about the 21st century, making sure that we've got high-speed internet. We need to move into the next economy, making sure that we've got infrastructure like the ports, and we've got to rebuild bridges and our roads. My goodness, there's such a need for that. So I really look forward to being that representative that's here in the 21st century. I've used a computer. I've sent a text. I've used social media. I think it's critical that we stay connected with Alaskans in that way and engage so that we can all be a part of it. My opponent has proudly said he hasn't used a computer. He has never sent a text message. Come on.
Talking with Alyse Galvin. She's running for Congress. Now, okay, you're talking about technology.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, I have friends, we have Ethan Berkowitz every week. He's a buddy. I have a lot friends across the spectrum, and that's one of the reasons I think your folks said get on Tom's show, because I'm reasonable in the interview and I think polite and thoughtful on that, and you have been the same. One thing that I hear from, I guess I would say my side is, oh, Lord, when we look at Nancy Pelosi or Ilhan Omar, where I went to law school in St. Louis Park, St. Paul, who I dislike her to the core, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm no fan of, Maxine Waters, it's that ilk, that group that you're perceived as working with. You're going to join their team, and it's like, that doesn't represent Alaska. Then we look at like Portland and fires and riots in Minneapolis and Seattle, and on my side, I hear Alyse is that team. She's not the Republicans. She's not going to vote for Trump. I mean, are you going to vote for Trump or Biden?
I'm really glad that you asked about this. It's about who I am. I really am, because I think people, sadly, just are misconceiving the idea because they're getting things through the mail or whatever they see on television. And I'll tell you what, I'm not a Democrat, and I'll tell you why I'm not, and why I ran in the Democratic primary. I am independent, and we really need to move beyond the partisanship that's, I'll call it hyper-partisanship, because it's not bringing us to a table to get something done. So let me explain about the Democratic primary. And I'll share it with you in a sports analogy, because I think that may help.
And we have 2 minutes. 2 minutes, just because the show has a hard end.
We're given a choice of either having to play, let's say, the Steelers and the Patriots at the same time, or they could take on the Steelers first, and if they win the Steelers, then if they win, then what they do is that the Steelers would help them beat the Patriots. They take the second path every time, right? There's no difference here. I took on the Democratic candidates in the primary. I beat them 85%, by the way. I beat them fair and square as an independent. And I beat them despite them railing on and on and on about my support for Anwar, gun rights. I'm against the Green New Deal. Then the Alaska Democratic Party will now help me beat Don Young. It just makes sense that I would choose that route. It does not make me a Democrat. I am still an independent.
You sound like Al Gross, who says, I'm not a Democrat, I'm independent. Okay, Alyse Galvin we're talking with, wrapping it up because we're on this hard end. We're going to go back to Mike Gallagher here next up on KVNT. Okay. But very last question, are you going to vote for Trump or Biden?
I have not decided. I'm really focused on my own race. I'll tell you that. Believe me, this is a lot of work.
Yeah, I know it is. Well, you are working hard, and you answer the tough questions. Alyse Galvin, it's been a pleasure. We'll try to get you back on maybe one more time before the election. Would that be cool?
Okay. You bet. Thanks
Awesome.
so much, Tom.
Thank you,
Thanks for having
Alyse
me.
Galvin.
Thanks to your listeners.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to answering more questions of all.
Absolutely. Alyse Galvin, you can find her online, certainly social media, website, Facebook. Folks, we're signing off. Enjoy your day. It's the Tom Anderson Show.